Today we're talking all about master studies, what they are, why we do them, and how to actually get something useful out of them. I know it might take you back to boring school lessons, but I promise we can get a lot out of them and make them more joyful too. So hello, if you're new here, my name is Katie. I'm a full-time sketchbook artist. I talk a lot about mixed media and I share my process here on the channel. So I've done a few master studies in my sketchbooks throughout the year, so I'm going to be sharing a bit more about them and sharing the process too. But I want to do this video about master studies. So I put a question box over on my Instagram stories earlier this week and I had a lot of questions. So instead of doing them in a random order, I'm going to try and order them in this video in a way that makes sense. So we're going to start with our why. Why do a master study in the first place? And we're going to go all the way through from how you can do that, how to choose them, to finding your intentions with them, and then we're ending with crediting and sharing. So I hope you enjoy this one. Let's get on with it and start with why do a master study and what exactly is it? So a master study is when you study an artwork by another artist, usually someone you admire or a piece that you like, with the goal of learning how and why they made the choices that they did. The important part here is that the goal isn't to make a finished piece. The goal is the understanding, and for me, I think it's important to learn as you go. So just like we use our sketchbooks as places to play and experiment, I love to use master studies to gain insight and learn lessons that I wouldn't know otherwise. There is so much wealth from other artists, and sometimes the only way we can learn these is from actively trying it out and doing it ourselves. You learn a lot as you create it yourself, so things like, why did they simplify this here? Why is this colour warmer than I thought it would be? Why did they choose this colour in the first place? Or why does this composition feel balanced even though it's asymmetrical? Mostly it comes down to learning, taking their expertise and their paintings, their play and their practice, and applying it ourselves. I've been sharing a few pieces on screen of some of my own master studies in my sketchbook from artists like Bertha Morisot, Clarence Gagnon, and Paul Cézanne. I'm going to share some painting process as we go of some master studies too, but let's move on to the next part now, and the one that had the most questions. How to choose the artist and the piece to study. So I think the term master can feel a little bit daunting, but it doesn't have to be an artist from like 100 years ago or someone super distinguished in their field. For me, it has to be something that you admire and want to learn from. In my opinion, there's no point picking a piece of art that you're going to have a horrible time painting. Sure, you can learn from something that maybe you dislike and find ways to like it, but I think art is about joy after all, and we don't want to torment ourselves by copying a process that we're not interested in. As I always say, follow your joy and your inspiration to what you would like to do. Is there a specific artist that you love? Have you been to a museum recently and there was a painting that stood out? If you want to learn something specific during this practice, then it's really helpful to start with a question. What do I want to improve? If it's colour, look for artists with confident or intentional colour use. If it's anatomy, look for someone known for structure. If it's mood or lighting, then choose someone strong in atmosphere. You don't have to study the greats or the masters in a historical sense. You can definitely study contemporary artists, illustrators, and even concept artists. So anyone whose work is doing something that you want to understand. Okay, so next up, we want to set our intent. You can, of course, just pick a painting that you love and go for it. I've definitely done that many times. You don't have to follow the steps that I'm about to share or answer these questions if it sounds like too much work for you. If you just want to get on with that painting, then I always recommend just going for that. You know that I'm not one for rules anyway, but I also know that I had a lot of questions about this and sometimes it's really helpful to have some guidance. That's the main reason why I wrote my book Sketchbook Joy and share these videos in the first place. So I've picked a painting before and I've learned a lot of lessons during and afterwards, not necessarily going in knowing what I'd learn. So that's still a brilliant and helpful thing to do. It's just about what works for each of us. But if you do feel a bit paralysed by choice, we can start with the question of what is the focus of this master study? Are you studying colour palettes, value structure, mark making, maybe composition? Although I do love that freestyle sort of approach, going in with a technical focus can be really helpful. It helps us choose what and who to study when the options are endless. But how do you decide what to study? How do you find it? So in terms of finding art, I did get quite a few questions about that too, of finding the art in like a broader sense. If you can, visiting museums and art galleries is a brilliant way to discover new artists and paintings that you wouldn't have found otherwise. It can be quite easy to stay in our sort of echo chamber or bubble of art that we like and sometimes being pushed to look at other art movements can be really inspirational and surprise us in its own way. Find the things that make you excited or that you're really intrigued by and focus on that. Other ways include art books, which I'm sharing on screen now because I am building quite a collection. I love to source these secondhand, so scouring the bookshelves of the art section in my local charity shops or secondhand bookstores. Flip through the pages and see if anything stands out or catches your eye. And you can do this online too. I find new artists by reading Substacks, watching YouTube videos and art documentaries, and making notes if they reference other artists. Then I just look them up, I take a scan of the Google image page of their work, and use that as a jumping off point. So once you've picked a painting or a drawing to study, it's time to tackle the different ways to actually do it. So there are lots of ways to approach master studies, and copying a piece is only one of them. So some examples are value-only studies where you ignore the colour completely and focus on the value or tone. You can do colour studies with very simplified shapes, line studies to understand structure and mark making, or small thumbnail studies to analyse the composition. And these are really great if you're short on time and they can still teach you a lot. So even when I'm doing a more complete copy, I'm not aiming for perfection. I'm just constantly asking myself, why is this simplified here? Or why is this edge soft but this other one sharp? Why did they move the paintbrush at this angle or in this way? Why does this area have more contrast? Lots of questions like that. And asking these questions as you go really helps us to learn. And it doesn't have to be conscious either. I've given you those examples, but you'll find these questions pop into your mind as you create anyway. You don't have to have set things because you'll likely find the curiosity as you go. Plus, as I said at the beginning, we're all different artists and have different likes and dislikes. I might be totally enamoured with a specific colour palette of a piece, and you'll be more interested in the mark making and the brush strokes. So focus in on the part that you are enjoying or intrigued by instead. Another big question is whether you should copy the piece exactly or interpret it in your own style. So this is another way to do a master study, and I've done both, of doing a copy and then also using the things I've learned to apply it to something myself. Here I am at a local nature reserve where I've done multiple paintings before and I felt like it was getting quite repetitive. But I learnt from studying Cézanne that he painted places like Mount Saint-Victoire hundreds and hundreds of times, so I painted it again. And I focused on his mark making and I loved the blue that I added at the end. You'll also see an example after this where, again, I used Cézanne's work to inspire me and painted my own thing by setting up some still lifes and using methods that jumped out to me from his paintings. So you can absolutely create your own work inspired by colour palettes or mark making, but if you are early in your learning or studying something very specific, then I'd say copy it more directly. Copying trains your observation skills and shows you what you're missing, and it can be really helpful in developing your own voice too. It helps you understand your preferences. And once you understand the idea, then you can start interpreting and applying it in your own style. So it can be a bit daunting to do this the other way around. With the sketchbook spread I did for Bertha Morisot as part of my 30-day Sketchbook Joy Challenge last year, I'll pop that on screen. I studied one of her paintings on the left, and then I painted this cat with the same sort of colour palette in the background, the same mediums, and with those beautiful flowers. So it's clearly mine, but also heavily influenced by the painting next to it. And the same goes for medium. So there were quite a few questions asking if you have to use the same medium as the artist, and for me, you definitely do not have to use the same medium as the original, but if your goal is to understand technique, then matching the medium can be really helpful. Materials was a question that came up a lot. What material should I use? Do I need to copy exactly what they used? You really don't need fancy materials for master studies, and like I said, I am definitely of the mind that you can use whatever tools and mediums you have. You can use your favourite supplies and focus on the practice and the learning instead of fighting your setup. Sometimes we feel like we need these specific supplies to suddenly make us create how we want to in our head, and it just doesn't work like that. So in all of the examples that I've shared today, I haven't used the same mediums as the artist I was studying, but I still learned so much. For me, I have no interest in painting with oils, so instead I'll just use acrylics because that's what I have to hand. I use square-tipped brushes instead of my usual round brushes, and that makes a big difference too. So little tweaks like that can definitely help. A few more tips that help a lot when it comes to making your master studies. Work smaller than you think. It can be a small thumbnail or just the size of your sketchbook spread, but you definitely don't need to do them in canvases like maybe some of the paintings you're studying are, and you don't have to feel forced to work bigger than you want to. Don't over polish, so it doesn't have to match perfectly. I think this one is really, really important because it's still yours and you'll still learn, but don't try to get it a perfect match. That is an impossible task and not what it's about. We're not aiming for perfectionism here. Next up is to write notes as you go or after you finish. So taking stock of what you've created and not necessarily analysing, but certainly noting what it is that worked or didn't work is really, really helpful. It may not be as successful as you hoped when you set out, but that doesn't matter because you'll still have learned something. So focus on those areas, and if you had a fun time doing it, then that's the most important part. You don't want a direct copy. It will always be yours because it's done in your hand, so focus on the differences or the parts that you enjoyed the most. Lastly, let's just quickly cover crediting and sharing. So it's really important if you are sharing a master study online to always credit the original artist clearly. Name them, link their work if you can, and be really upfront that it is a study. It shows respect and keeps the focus on where it should, which is that you are learning that this is a practice study and you're not trying to pass it off as your own. I try to add the name of the painting and the artist on the spread, which is really helpful for me to reference when I look back too. It's also really important to not create prints or sell your studies because it is copyright infringement. So I use master studies to practice, to play, and I keep them in my sketchbook or as my own private practice. So master studies aren't about copying their work really accurately or copying their voice. It's more about borrowing their experience so you get to learn from it. Kind of like a kickstart or a jump start so you don't have to figure out everything from scratch. So let me know if you've done master studies before down in the comments, or hopefully this video has inspired you to give it a go. It's amazing how helpful they are and how much we can learn from them, or even just introducing us to new techniques and ideas that we haven't tried out before. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Do let me know what you think down below in the comments, or if you have any other questions about master studies. A huge thank you for watching and a big shout out to my patrons. Without their support, I wouldn't be able to make these new YouTube videos every week. So I hope to see you next Sunday in my new YouTube video, and I hope you have a creative week. See you later.